Hey everybody, it's Taylor, and today I'm gonna fix this dress. Well, not today, over probably like 3 weeks because I know how slow I work. But we're gonna pretend through the magic of movie making that it's only gonna take, 30 minutes or something. So this is a dress that I made in 2000, several years ago. And I made it once and I wore it once basically for one party, and then it just kind of never got worn again. Part of that is because in the interim I made new stays, and as you can see, this doesn't quite fit so great anymore with my new stays. And another part is that something went terribly wrong here with this sleeve bodice area. So part of the issue, this was like a rookie mistake even though I was not a rookie when I made this, is I cut these little sleeve caps to capture this specific element of this little branch, but that's on the bias. In the interim, this has stretched wildly. It should be, of course, a much shorter strap. Although even without that, there's still kind of a mess with the sleeves. You can see there's like some extra fabric, they're set kind of wonky. This whole area is just too narrow in general. I have very broad shoulders, like from my neck to the outside of my shoulders is really long, and I'm really bad about compensating for that. So everything pulls in weird ways and is kind of wonky and stuff like that. The overall bodice fit is not terrible. The back is especially decent. There is some pulling because these don't quite fit me perfectly anymore because of the new stays, but honestly, like, I'm kind of okay with that. But this is the primary issue. There's also, it's cut too high in the bust with my new stays. This fabric in general is pretty wrinkly. It is a silk shantung almost. I'm not really entirely sure what fabric this is. It's quite flimsy, and I have it lined with just a very fine cotton, so it didn't really provide enough structure with it. I'm going to try to counteract that by maybe adding in some boning. If I bone this front channel, it might help with that a little bit. And also if I bone the back, it may also help to alleviate some of those wrinkles that you see there. But we'll have to just see if that works. I'm not really sure about it. But step number one is going to be taking off the sleeves and then trying to deal with this whole situation here. And once I have new shoulder straps cut and added on, that's also probably going to change the fit of the bodice a little bit, so we'll look at that first. I think there's a lot of opportunity in revisiting old projects that you've worked on, because your skills are only going to improve with everything that you make and every project you take on. And being able to step back in time 5 years or 8 years and seeing what kind of progress you've made and how you can fix some of those issues is so gratifying, because it like sort of proves to you that, oh yeah, I am learning how to do this and I'm figuring stuff out. And you get to then reuse these dresses that you spent a lot of money and time on and maybe didn't get the love that they deserved. So it's kind of a great way to recycle your wardrobe. And it's 100% what they would have done back then as well. They're not going to let a dress like this go to waste. They're going to fix it and make it better and refashion it. So we can do the same thing. Okay. So we have a good starting point. Hopefully we'll be able to turn this into something better. It's still a lovely dress, and this could easily be hidden with like a fluffy fichu or something so that like you couldn't even see any of this, but I have some opportunity to change it. So let's go ahead and revisit this old dress and turn it into something that's even better.
I'm starting out with my trusty old seam ripper. Since I hand sewed a lot of this gown, taking it apart again is a breeze. It's a real pain to take out machine stitches, but hand sewn ones come out with just a few cuts. If you have a precious fabric and you think you may dismantle your gown at a later point, I definitely recommend hand sewing. It's easier on you and your fabric in the long run. I'm taking out the sleeves and the shoulder straps entirely and turning this back into a flat bodice. Everything gets a good iron since wearing it caused a few big creases, particularly under my arms. The first piece I'm redoing is the shoulder straps, so I'm just using my old ones as a pattern, but cutting very generous seam allowances to ensure these are wide enough. I'm using a good sturdy linen from Burnley and Trowbridge to create these shoulder straps. The fashion fabric is going to come at a later step. They're just going to be pinned on for the first try on, and then I'll adjust them to my actual shoulders when I put the gown on.
Wow, what a difference this already makes. I mean, you can see now how smooth this all looks just because everything's like pulled into the proper place. And I don't have this weird sagginess anymore from the sleeves. Damn, I mean, like, look at that. Look how smooth that is now. It even really like changed the front a bunch. Revisit your dresses, it makes all the difference in the world. Ah!
Now that I know where these are supposed to be, I'm going to baste down the shoulders in the back to keep them in place while I work. This will get stitched over again later, so these are just big stitches. I'm also folding back the neckline edge of the strap and basting that down.
All right, so fixing the shoulder straps made tremendous progress. I mean, you can already see that the fit on this is so much better just from sort of yanking everything up and holding it in the right position. Looks great. So here are the next changes I'm gonna make. I'm gonna get a little bit closer. I'm going to drop the neckline just a bit. You can see that it's sort of curving over. So my stay line is about right here, and these need to come just above the stays. So I'm going to actually widen this ever so slightly and then scoop it around right here just to open up the neckline a little bit more. And then I'm going to raise this slightly. You can see that the way it sort of comes over my hips, it needs to be a little bit sharper. That's what this wrinkle here is from. It's from this tension that's pulling against my hip because I have this cut too shallowly. So I'm going to take off the skirt pleating right about here, and I'm going to move in the line of the bodice just ever so slightly and curve it more, which is also going to bring this front in more, so it'll look a little bit more like, I mean, just that difference right there. Like, look at what a huge change that makes to the overall look. So you can see these little changes really make a big deal. Now, this is currently closed with hook and eye tape. And I love hook and eye tape, but in this situation, it's causing a little bit of pulling because there's like these little pressure points. I'm probably gonna take that out and just switch to sewing the front closed, which is what I normally do here. But I'm gonna wait a little while on that, and we'll go ahead and make these changes and then see. Now I just have the front of these straps pinned in. They are basted down in the back, and they're just pinned in the front because I don't want to anchor these until I have everything settled here, because I may need to do just a little bit of adjusting on this one. So they're just pinned in for now. Okay, so let's make those changes and we'll see how it looks then.
While I had this tried on, I marked the new lines I wanted with pins, and now I'm just going to go over those with chalk in preparation for cutting the fabric. Remember that you can always trim more off, but it's much harder to add back on, so if you aren't sure, just make small trims until you're happy with what your new line looks like. I don't show it here, but I did make several trims on this before I got it to where I wanted it to be. I made the changes to both the top and the bottom of the bodice at the same time.
All right, I've got these changes now just pinned in. All right, so you can see where I've dropped the bodice line, which is much better, and where I have narrowed the whole front and raised the waistline a little bit. I've obviously unpinned the skirt. I think when I pin this back, instead of putting it this far, I think I'll actually pin it in a little bit higher so that there's more freedom here, which gives it just a much sleeker line, which is more appropriate for the 1780s, which is when this style is from. So I'm pretty happy with these changes. I think this looks really nice. I really like these changes. Okay, so I'll sew these changes in, match them over to this side, and then we can start talking about the sleeves again. It's coming along.
The bodice changes are being sewn in with a spaced backstitch along the neckline. I unpicked and repleated about 3 completed inches of the waistline, making the pleats a bit deeper so I could set them further back than they were originally. The dress form is very helpful here to make sure all the pleats are hanging properly, and if you don't have one, definitely try it on before you sew them down. I sewed in the new pleats by backstitching along the waistline of the gown.
All right, we have the primary bodice changes totally complete. Drop neckline, raised and slenderized this part here, change the pleats location. Good changes. I'm really happy with these. Now it's time to tackle these sleeves. Don't you wish they had made sleeveless dresses in the 1780s? That would have been so convenient.
My original sleeves on this gown were a single piece pattern, but I have a new 2-piece pattern I wanted to try out. Please note that I did do a fitting on this sleeve, but I'm just not showing the process in this video. So let's just get right down to the good stuff, but remember to fit your sleeves first. In the name of reuse, I'm cutting the bottom half of the sleeve pattern out of the old sleeves of the gown, as this fabric would otherwise go to waste. The top of the sleeve is getting cut out of fresh fabric since I couldn't fit it on the original sleeve piece. The sleeve is lined with a fine but tightly woven cotton. All of the sleeve seams are sewn up by machine, and then I turned under a narrow cuff and hand sewed that down so that the sleeves are totally finished before I put them on the bodice.
It's time to set the sleeves of this now, but since this is a pattern that doesn't work with itself, the sleeves don't match the bodice and I've made so many changes, I don't have like a marking point where I know where to set the sleeves. So the way I manage that, and honestly what I do with almost everything I make, is I just put the sleeve on and mark where it needs to go. And when you put it on, you can sort of feel where it fits right. The curve will sort of sit in the right spot. What I like to do is use the seam of the sleeve and mark where on the bodice I want that to go. So I know that this is actually lined up, boy, nearly perfectly with my sleeve cap. So I just made this mark here. So now I know when it's time to set the sleeve, this is what I will line up. I'm also going to mark on the top of my shoulder where I want any pleats to start if I need them to manage the extra fullness in my sleeve cap. All right. And then I'll just repeat that with the second one. It's important to put on both sleeves and do this because they may not line up perfectly depending on how your shoulders are. I personally have one shoulder that's higher than the other. I'm sure you can see this. And I also have much bigger muscles in this side of my body from jewelry making. I like squeeze and move and twist so much that this shoulder is very different from this one. So don't just assume that since you've marked it on one side, it's gonna fit right on the other side as well. Even a few millimeters can make a difference with this sort of thing. And in fact, this one is a little lower. All right, here's something else I'm gonna do. I'm gonna mark on the actual inside of the sleeve that this one is left and this one is right. I'm just putting an L and an R on them because there's nothing worse than setting your sleeves backwards. Actually, what's worse is setting them backwards like 3 times, which I've definitely done on more than one occasion.
Once the seam placement is marked, I'm basting the sleeves in with large basting stitches to test the fit before final sewing. I'm using a contrasting thread so it's easy to see.
Moment of truth. All right, I also use my dress form to go ahead and pin in those pleats in the back to deal with that extra fabric. The angle of them is not perfect. They should be more perpendicular instead of that little angle, so I'll just fiddle with that a little bit. But otherwise, this sleeve looks pretty good. I have good range of motion. This, being able to raise your arm like this, comes from having the armpit cut super high, way higher than our modern clothes are, and it feels weird at first, but you get used to it within seconds. But that's how you get this range of motion here. I can reach forward. This is good. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna make these changes to this other side here and put those pleats in, fiddle with this pleat a little bit, and then I'm actually going to sew this in for real instead of just basted like it is right now. One of the reasons I really like basting is because it means that you can easily sew on your sleeve permanently, and you have an excellent guide because you have your basting stitches that you can just stitch just right along the edge of, and you don't have to worry about pins and you don't have to worry about misstitching a line, and it's just a perfectly easy way to do it totally mindlessly because you've already done the hard work of like figuring it out, and now you can basically just sew along a dotted line. I mean literally a dotted line, and you have your sleeve set. Easy peasy. Basting is the best. It's also one of the reasons I like to use a darker thread for my basting because it's much easier to follow along and see it when you're sewing with your real thread.
Now that the sleeves are sewn on, it's time to work on that last piece, the shoulder strap. I'm going to use a scrap of fabric to drape the pattern piece I need, and then I'll cut it out of the fashion fabric. If you're doing this on the dress form and taking the same enormous risk that I am, be very careful during this step. The last thing you want to do is make an errant cut at this late in the game. One last try on to make sure my dress form isn't lying to me. Now each edge of this pattern piece gets marked so I don't accidentally flip it around.
This fabric has all these little wonderful birdie and butterfly friends on it, so I want to try to put one of each of these on the shoulder strap just so I can sort of highlight them because they're so cute. So I'm going to try to lay out my shoulder strap to capture these little guys using some of my scrap fabric from cutting out my sleeves.
And finally, this gets sewn down along all of the edges with spaced back stitches. And she is done! Ah, I'm so excited about this. In the end, even after all of my waffling, I did not end up needing to bone the center front channel. Fixing all these other issues actually helped to smooth out this front, particularly when it's closed all the way.
I left in the hook and eye tape because it made fitting this so easy. Just being able to put this on and not have to think about pinning it in was such a breeze. I think I'm gonna do this on every single dress that I own from this point forward. It was super, super helpful. I will still be sewing it closed. Because this is not rigid, if I don't have it sewn closed, it does still pull at the point where the hooks and eyes are. So when I wear this garment, I actually just whip stitch down the whole center front of it, and that just sort of tightens everything up just a little bit. It also gives tension to the whole front instead of these individual places, so it just smooths everything out. It really does work really well. I know sewing yourself in sounds like a crazy thing to do, but it's actually really easy, especially when you have these hooks and eyes, and it makes for a really nice finish on the front of your dress when you're wearing it. And you don't have to worry about your pins coming out. I hate that so much, so this is definitely a better method to do it. I also ended up adding a single bone to the center back seam of this. I just used a flexible synthetic whalebone, which I know I have sitting around here somewhere. Here we go. This was just a scrap piece of synthetic whalebone that I had sitting around for my last day's project. So I just added a piece of this to the center back seam just to give it a little bit more rigidity. I think the reality is this bodice is just a little bit too long. So this center backbone just helps to give it that extra rigidity so you don't get any weird wrinkling or anything like that when you're wearing it. So it was a super easy fix and it really makes a big difference to the end of it. I don't typically bone my bodices that way, but it was helpful in this situation. This dress deserves a first spin in somewhere really special and somewhere very on brand, and frankly something that inspired me to make this dress right now. So let me take you there now.
I am so delighted with the remake of this gown. It was such a great project to bring new life into this amazing fabric, and now I have a dress I am so excited about wearing. It goes perfectly with the explosion of cherry blossoms we are seeing around the city right now, and I know this will be a beloved spring frock for years to come, and until it's time for another remake. This project took me about 25 hours of work and cost me exactly $0 additional to make, so I'd say that is a success by any measure. I hope this video has inspired you to take a look at some of your previous costumes. Do you have any gowns that could use a redo? Let me know about them in the comments. I'm so curious. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day.